Now let's talk about S-turns across a road. What is it? It's a maneuver in which the airplane's ground track describes semicircles of equal radii on each side of a straight line on the ground. Why do we care? Because this develops the ability to maintain a relationship between a plane and the ground, adjust bank to correct for changing ground speed and maintain a constant radius, establish a wind correction angle to maintain track, compensate for drift during changing orientations, and arrive at a specific point on required headings. We're going to talk about the purpose, selecting an altitude and reference, the basics, performing the S-turns, and other details. Now again, the purpose of this is to maintain a specific relationship between the airplane and the ground. We need to learn how to divide our attention between the flight path, ground references, the flight controls, and scanning outside and instrument indications. We need to learn how to adjust bank angle to correct for ground speed changes and to maintain constant radius turns. So let's talk about it. Like before, we're going to select an entry altitude that's going to give us a good distance from the ground to adjust if we need to deal with an engine failure, but also give us a close enough distance to the ground to give us a good vision of our ground reference points. So the ACS, I believe, says between 8 and 1,200 feet. I like to do these at 1,000 feet because that gives me a nice round number, and it's just like flying the traffic pattern at the airport. We need to select a reference line. For this, we want a nice long road or a river or a railroad track, something like that, to complete our turns. And we want to enter on the downwind. So if this is the wind, we want to enter like this, right? And that's what our S-turns across the road are going to look like. So the basics. The maneuver looks like this. Like I said before, we're going to enter on the downwind perpendicular to the road. And because the wind wants to blow us off, past our road, we're going to enter a very steep bank first, and then we're going to roll into a moderate bank as we fly parallel to the road, and then finally we're going to shallow up our bank and fly wings level across the road. And then as we continue through the road, we're going to enter a shallow bank, because remember, the wind wants to push us back to the road, so we don't really want to help the wind do that. So we're going to keep it a nice moderate turn once we're parallel. Then we'll have to actually enter a steep turn before we go wings level again across the road. Now remember, you want to stay ahead of the aircraft. So the best thing to do is enter at a maneuver speed of about 90 to 100 knots. You don't want to be going full afterburner here, because the faster you're going, the less time you have to think about things. Also, the aircraft tends to be a little less stable at higher airspeeds. So 90 to 100 knots, not a bad way to go. Check your POH, of course, for your maneuver speed. And then pitch, power, and trim. If you can be trimmed for hands-off flight before you enter this maneuver, it's going to make things so much easier for you. All right, so before we enter, what do we do? Before any maneuver, clearing turns. You got it. So, Mr. DPE, I'm going to clear my wing to the left, enter a left turn, clear the airspace, look up and out, and then turn it right, clear the airspace again, clearing to the right, or enter a full 360 for your clearing turn. Once that's set, then you can start looking for your reference line, maybe use a mountain or your heading bug for your reference points. And then, again, we want to enter on the downwind, perpendicular to the road or the reference line, and then add our altitude. And remember, we don't want to lose any altitude while we're performing this maneuver. So when you're in a bank, what happens to your vertical lift? We've talked about this before. Your vertical lift now is decreased, and we have to account for this loss of vertical lift by adding maybe a bit of back trim or a nose up trim, or adding a little bit of power. Now, the entire time we're entering this turn, we're dealing with this S-turn. We're trying to anticipate and correct for this wind that wants to blow us all over the place. So, be prepared to adjust your pitch, power, and bank angle to account for that wind. Remember that every time you complete a turn, you should be flying wings level, perpendicular, to the road or your reference line, and then you should be entering immediately into your next turn, nice and shallow for the second turn, and then going again wings level once you cross the road. Here's some details. You want to maintain constant altitude. For us, that's plus or minus 0, right? We're good pilots. But the ACS says you've got 100 feet to play with in each direction. I would say shoot for 0, plus or minus 0 on your altitude, and you'll be good to go. Remember, you want to trim for level flight prior to starting the maneuver, and as your bank increases, your back elevator pressure needs to be increased to maintain altitude and vice versa. Again, that's because you lose vertical lift when you are in a bank, so keep that in mind. You need to learn how to divide your attention. You don't want to fixate on one single thing. This is a very dynamic maneuver. You have to be looking up 90% of your time, looking for other traffic, looking at your reference points, and then double checking 10% of your time inside the aircraft, checking your instruments to make sure you're not losing any altitude. All your engine instruments are good to go. But again, 90% of your time should be up and out of the aircraft. You want to maintain constant airspeed. A constant power setting and stable altitude go a long way in maintaining constant airspeed. So again, select a good power setting, pitch, power, and trim so that you don't have to be messing with your power throughout the entire maneuver. Increased bank and elevator back pressure may require an increase in power and vice versa. Keep that in mind. As always, maintain proper coordination. You don't want your passengers to feel like they're getting pulled or pushed to the outside of the turn. That's your rudder pedals. If you feel like you're not getting pulled straight down, you are uncoordinated, and add in appropriate rudder. Don't forget your turn coordinator. That little ball should be living in its cage. If it goes off to the left, you need to put in left rudder. If it goes off to the right, you need to press with your right foot, right rudder. You don't want to be using uncoordinated rudder to fix the radius or roll out of the turn. Stay coordinated. Use bank, not rudder. Questions? Go ahead and drop them in the comments or shoot me a DM on Discord and I'll answer them. Thanks again for watching, guys.